Hey folks, welcome back. My name is Krishna, and in this video, we're going to take a look at the anatomy of an illustrated montage. We're going to talk about focal point, leading lines, visual hierarchy, and depth. And if you look at this particular style of illustration, you'll see that it includes a lot of different elements that are thrown together. Now, a montage is different from a collage. A collage is just a random assortment of different elements that are all thrown together, and they could all be the same size, and there's not really a narrative. It's more of a visually interesting type of arrangement. But a montage, when you pick different elements together, it's like a collage, but you have a form of a narrative. There is a structured way that this montage is telling you what it is. It is trying to communicate something about what you're looking at. It has a meaning, it has a purpose. So a focal point in this particular case is, where is the eye being directed to look? Now, when you're initially looking at this composition, you're probably looking at all of the different things that are on this particular illustration. But your eye ultimately goes to a specific spot, whether you're aware of it or not. In this particular case, the focal point is our adventurer character. Why? Well, because he's in the center of this composition. That's one way that you can create a focal point, not the only way. And you have other elements that are pointing back towards or looking towards our focal point. Let's talk about leading lines. Leading lines can come in two forms. They can come in explicit leading lines, or they can be implied or implicit leading lines. A leading line is simply when you're looking at a composition, you are looking at the outlines of the objects and elements that you have, and you're just seeing where your eye goes. For example, if we were to trace a line that goes around this indigenous person towards our adventurer, we can see that the eye is kind of moving from the right towards our hero. Similarly, we have implied leading lines, which are an arrangement of objects that don't form a direct line, but the way that they are composed kind of takes you to the main point because they're all pointing towards our hero. In fact, they're firing. This has some implied leading lines, and also has some explicit leading lines by the gunfire that is pointing and creating the burst around our hero. We have explicit leading lines that are coming from the fingers of this zombie. Notice that the fingers are pointing down towards the face or the head of the hero. Similarly with the thumb. We've got the zombie looking at our hero, as I mentioned before, but if we were to trace an outline here, we can see that the eye is kind of moving around, and we're getting to that same point over here. So it's very important that when you're assembling your elements that you are thinking about leading lines that are moving the viewer towards a specific focal point. So I'm just going to annotate a few more of these leading lines. Leading lines, again, like the dune here, is kind of moving us in this direction down towards our hero. The pyramids are pointing up towards the hero. The barrel of this tank is pointing us to our hero. Even the side of this temple and the leaves are pointing us back. The dinosaur, if we were to trace the leading lines, the dinosaur and the vegetation. So this was all done very deliberately. Even the direction of the flag and the direction of the landscape are all pointing us towards our place of interest, which is our focal point. So that's focal point and leading lines. Very important to understand what those two terms actually mean. And a good way of maybe reinforcing what you're learning here is to look at other illustrative montages and to bring them in and to do this type of analysis so that you can see for yourself how these elements are deliberately arranged. So next we're going to talk about visual hierarchy. Visual hierarchy has to do with the importance of different elements within your composition. So if I were to look at the size of these different objects here, well, I think we can go ahead and say that the airplanes here are roughly small in size compared to some of the other objects here. We've got our hero, who is relatively large. We've got our zombie. He's a little bit off in the distance, and he's kind of more of a medium shape. We've got our UFOs that are in the back. They're in a small shape. So we've got medium, 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 medium. We've got the pyramids are small. We've got the skulls, small, medium. We've got these guys that are getting blown up. They're medium shaped objects. These bushes are small, small. And you can see that by just labeling these things, this is basically a small shape. Actually more of like a medium shape. And the palm trees themselves are small. The clouds are small. So you can see that a good montage will have an assortment of large, medium, and small objects that are within the composition. So there's, when you're looking at your own illustrative montage, or if you're trying to plan something like this out, include large, medium, and small elements and, just bring them in. And that constitutes visual hierarchy. Usually the largest item is the most important item. It's not always the case, but in this particular example it is. And then you have medium-shaped or medium-sized objects that are somewhat important, and you've got small objects. So they all work in concert together to create this interesting narrative. Now, depth is also something very important too. So depth is when you're dealing with things that appear to provide a sense of distance from the viewer. So if we look at depth, we can say that the pyramids are in the background. We can say the temple is in the midground. The dino is in the midground. The tank is in the foreground. She's more in the background. The planes are in the background. These guys are in the foreground. So foreground has to do with things that are closest to you or the viewer. And then we go into the midground. Midground elements are things that are a little bit further away from the foreground. So you want to also ensure that you have depth. You can achieve depth by overlapping different elements in front of or behind others. You can see the zombie is behind the temple, but his hand reaches out, and it's now, I would say the hand is more of a foreground element because it's closer to the viewer than the zombie's head is, for example. The other thing about a montage, at least what makes a montage interesting in my opinion, is that you are getting a sense of the people, the places, and the environments. There's multiple environments. There's different people that are in here that gives you a sense of what this story could be about. There may be animals, there may be vehicles, other things that go towards the viewer forming a narrative in their own mind by looking at this. Now, this is not a movie. It doesn't exist anywhere outside of this montage, but when you look at it, you're starting to see certain elements that will maybe give you the idea that this is some kind of an adventurer, science fiction, kind of very pulp type of adventure, kind of like Indiana Jones. So that's, again, a quick look at analyzing a montage. I hope you found this video to be helpful. If you did and you want to see me actually make a montage, leave a comment down below and I'll go ahead and talk you through some of the techniques that I use to assemble a montage from scratch. As always, thanks for watching. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you're new, and consider giving this a like so other folks can find this content as well. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.